The slap came so fast Kendra Lancaster barely had time to brace herself, her head snapping to the side as her stepfather's palm connected with her cheek, the taste of copper flooding her mouth where her teeth cut into her soft flesh. She had made the mistake again, looking directly at Marcus when he spoke to her, forgetting in that brief moment of defiance that he demanded she keep her eyes downcast in his presence like some beaten animal. Her mother had died 6 months ago in Mineral Park, Arizona, leaving Kendra alone with a man who grew meaner with each passing day, his grief twisting into something dark and violent that he took out on the girl who reminded him too much of the woman he had lost. "How many times do I have to teach you, girl?" Marcus hissed, his breath reeking of whiskey even though it was barely noon on this sweltering August day in 1882. "You do not look at me. You hear me speak, you look at your feet. You understand?" Kendra nodded, her auburn hair falling across her face to hide the tears that threatened to spill down her bruised cheek. At 19 years old, she should have options, should have somewhere else to go, but her mother's death had left her penniless and alone in a territory that offered few opportunities for women without family or means. The small house on the edge of Mineral Park felt more like a prison with each passing week, and she knew deep in her bones that she needed to escape before Marcus's temper escalated beyond slaps and harsh words. That afternoon, desperate for any excuse to leave the house, Kendra volunteered to pick up supplies from the general store in town. Marcus grunted his approval, too focused on his bottle to care much about her whereabouts as long as she returned before dark. She walked the dusty mile into Mineral Park proper, her boots kicking up red dirt with each step, the sun beating down mercilessly on her bonnet-covered head. The town was small but bustling, built up around the mining operations that had drawn prospectors and workers from across the country. Kendra kept her head down as she walked, Marcus's lessons having taught her to make herself invisible even when he was not around. The general store was blessedly cool inside, and Kendra took her time selecting the flour and coffee Marcus had demanded. She was counting out coins at the counter when the door swung open behind her, spurs jingling as someone entered. She did not turn around, keeping her attention fixed on the transaction, but she could feel someone's presence nearby, could sense eyes on her in a way that made her self-conscious about the fading bruise on her cheekbone that she had tried to powder over. "Madam, you dropped this," a deep voice said, and Kendra instinctively looked up as a hand extended toward her, holding a penny that must have rolled from her pile of coins. The man standing before her was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of weathered leather. He wore the typical gear of a working cowboy, dusty denim and a worn hat pushed back on his head to reveal dark hair that curled slightly at his temples. But it was his expression that caught Kendra off guard, the way his face shifted from polite helpfulness to concern as he took in her appearance, his gaze lingering on the bruise she had tried so hard to hide. Kendra immediately dropped her eyes to the floor, her heart hammering with an irrational fear that Marcus would somehow know she had looked at this stranger. "Thank you," she mumbled, reaching quickly for the penny without meeting his gaze again, but the cowboy did not move away. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, his voice dropping to a gentler tone. "Madam, are you all right? That looks like it hurts." "I'm fine," Kendra said automatically, the lie coming easily after months of practice. I fell, clumsy." She could feel his skepticism even without looking at him, could sense that he did not believe her for a second. The air between them felt charged somehow, heavy with unspoken words and questions. Finally, unable to stand the weight of his attention any longer, Kendra grabbed her parcels and turned to leave, keeping her gaze fixed firmly on the ground. "Wait," the cowboy called after her, and something in his voice made her pause despite her better judgment. She stood frozen near the door, not turning around, not daring to look back. "My name is Ethan Lancaster. I work at the Diamond L Ranch just north of town. If you ever need help, any kind of help at all, you can find me there. You understand?" Kendra's throat felt tight, emotion welling up so suddenly it shocked her. When had anyone last offered her kindness without expecting something in return? "I understand," she whispered, and then she fled into the bright afternoon, her packages clutched against her chest like armor. But she could not stop thinking about Ethan Lancaster over the following days. His name echoed in her mind during the long, tense evenings when Marcus drank himself into a stupor. She remembered the concern in his voice, the way he had not looked at her with pity but with genuine worry, as though her well-being actually mattered to someone in this harsh desert town. And she remembered what he had said about finding him if she needed help, though she could not imagine being brave enough to actually seek him out. The next incident with Marcus came a week later. Kendra had been washing dishes when he came up behind her, startling her so badly that she spun around and met his eyes before she could catch herself. The rage that flashed across his face turned her blood to ice. He grabbed her by the arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to leave marks, and shook her violently. "What did I tell you about those eyes?" he snarled, his face inches from hers. "You think you're better than me. You think you can just look at me however you want." "I'm sorry," Kendra gasped, trying to pull away from his grip. "I didn't mean to, you startled me, I'm sorry." He shoved her backward and she crashed into the kitchen table, pain exploding across her hip where it connected with the wooden edge. Marcus advanced on her, and for the first time, Kendra saw something in his eyes that went beyond anger, something that terrified her on a primal level. She realized with horrible clarity that she was in real danger, that his violence was escalating to a point where apologies and downcast eyes would no longer be enough to protect her. "Please," she whispered, hating the way her voice shook. "Please, I'll be more careful, I promise." Something in her fear seemed to satisfy him, and Marcus backed away, returning to his bottle with a grunt of disgust. Kendra stayed frozen against the table long after he had settled into his chair, her entire body trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline. That night, she barely slept, staring at the ceiling of her small room and trying to formulate a plan. She had no money, no family, nowhere to go. But she knew with certainty that she could not stay here much longer. The decision was made for her 2 days later. Kendra had been hanging laundry in the yard when Marcus came stumbling out of the house, more drunk than she had ever seen him at midday. He started ranting about her mother, about how Kendra was ungrateful, about how she owed him everything and gave him nothing but disrespect. When Kendra made the mistake of trying to defend herself, actually speaking back to him for the first time in months, he backhanded her so hard she fell to the ground. "You want to talk back to me?" Marcus roared, standing over her. "You want to act like you have any say in this house?" Kendra tasted blood again, felt it running from her nose down to her chin. But through the pain and fear, a spark of pure rage ignited in her chest. She was tired of being afraid, tired of making herself small, tired of living like a ghost in her own life. When Marcus reached down to grab her again, she scrambled backward, her hand closing around a rock from the garden border. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. And then, before she could think better of it, before fear could paralyze her again, Kendra pushed herself to her feet and ran. She heard Marcus shouting behind her, heard him stumbling after her, but fear gave her speed. She ran toward town, her split lip throbbing, her nose still bleeding, her vision blurred by tears and panic. She did not have a plan beyond getting away, beyond putting as much distance between herself and Marcus as possible. The sun beat down mercilessly as she ran, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her body protesting the exertion in the oppressive heat. Kendra was not sure how long she ran before she finally had to stop, her lungs burning, her legs shaking. She found herself on the north road out of town, bent over with her hands on her knees, trying desperately to catch her breath. Blood dripped from her face onto the dusty ground, dark drops that disappeared almost instantly into the thirsty earth. She needed water, needed shelter, needed to figure out what to do next, and then she remembered. The Diamond L Ranch. Ethan Lancaster had said she could find him there if she needed help. The ranch was supposed to be north of town, which meant she was heading in the right direction. Kendra straightened up, wiping blood from her face with her sleeve, and started walking again. She had no idea if Ethan had been serious about his offer, had no idea if he would even remember her, but she was out of options. Going back to Marcus was not a choice she could make and survive. The ranch appeared like a mirage after another mile of walking, buildings shimmering in the heat haze that rose from the desert floor. Kendra's steps slowed as she approached, suddenly uncertain, suddenly aware of how she must look with blood on her face and dress, with bruises darkening her skin, with desperation written in every line of her body. What if Ethan was not here? What if he had just been making polite conversation that day in the general store, never expecting that she would actually show up? But she had come too far to turn back now. Kendra walked through the ranch gates, past corrals where horses watched her with curious eyes, toward the main house where she could see people moving around. A few ranch hands stopped their work to stare at her, and she felt her cheeks burn with shame and embarrassment. She must look like a madwoman, appearing out of nowhere covered in blood and dirt. "Can we help you, miss?" one of the men called out, his tone wary but not unkind. Kendra opened her mouth to respond, but her throat was so dry from running and fear that only a croak came out. She tried again. "I'm looking for Ethan Lancaster," he said. "He told me I could find him here." The man's expression shifted to concern. "Ethan's out with the horses, but I'll get him. Why don't you come sit in the shade, miss? You look about ready to collapse." He was right. Now that she had stopped moving, Kendra could feel exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. She let the ranch hand guide her to a bench under an overhang, grateful for the shade and the chance to sit down. Someone brought her water, and she drank greedily, not caring that some of it spilled down her chin. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the cup. She heard him before she saw him, the sound of boots running across hard, packed earth. And then Ethan was there, dropping to a crouch in front of her, his face creased with worry and something that looked like anger, though she sensed instinctively that the anger was not directed at her. "What happened?" he asked, his voice tight. "Who did this to you?" And for the first time since her mother died, since Marcus had shown his true nature, since her life had become this nightmare of fear and violence, Kendra looked someone directly in the eye. She raised her gaze to meet Ethan's, letting him see the pain and fear and desperate hope in her expression, and she did not look away. "My stepfather," she said simply. "He doesn't like when I look at him." Ethan's jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists at his sides. But when he spoke, his voice was gentle, almost tender. "Then look at me instead. Look at me whenever you want, as long as you want. You're safe here." Something inside Kendra broke at those words, at the kindness and understanding in them. Tears spilled down her cheeks, mixing with the drying blood, and she found she could not look away from Ethan even if she wanted to. His eyes were warm and steady, full of a strength that had nothing to do with violence, full of a promise that she desperately wanted to believe. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she whispered, I don't have any money. I can't pay you for helping me. I couldn't stay there anymore. You don't need to pay me, Ethan said firmly. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and gently touched her chin, tilting her face to better see her injuries. His touch was feather light, so different from Marcus's brutal hands. We need to clean these cuts and make sure nothing's broken. Then we'll figure out the rest. But I want you to know right now that you don't have to go back there. Not ever if you don't want to. He'll come looking for me, Kendra said, fear tightening her chest again. When he sobers up, he'll realize where I've gone. He'll come here. Let him come, Ethan said, and there was steel in his voice now. This is Lancaster land, and he's not welcome on it. You understand? He can't touch you here. The ranch owner, a gruff but kind man named Samuel Morrison, agreed without hesitation to let Kendra stay. He was a widower himself, his own wife having died in childbirth years ago, and perhaps that made him sympathetic to Kendra's situation. He offered her a room in the main house, a small space that had belonged to his daughter before she married and moved to Tucson. It was simple but clean, with a real bed and a window that looked out over the desert. And to Kendra it felt like a palace. Ethan's wife, an older woman named Rosa who served as the ranch's cook and housekeeper, helped Kendra clean up, tutting over her injuries with maternal concern. She applied salve to the cuts and bruises, her touch gentle but efficient, and found Kendra a clean dress to wear. Through it all, Kendra felt like she was moving through a dream, unable to quite believe that she had escaped, that she was actually somewhere safe. That evening, as promised, Marcus appeared at the ranch. Kendra was in her room when she heard the shouting, heard Marcus's slurred voice demanding that they return his stepdaughter to him. Her first instinct was to hide, to make herself small and invisible the way she had learned to do. But then she heard another voice, calm and unwavering, and recognized it as Ethan's. Unable to stop herself, Kendra moved to the window where she could see the scene unfolding in the yard below. Marcus was swaying on his feet, clearly still drunk, his face red with rage. Ethan stood between Marcus and the house, his posture relaxed but ready, and he was not alone. Several other ranch hands had gathered, a silent show of support and strength. "She's not your property, and she's not leaving," Ethan was saying, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "She came here of her own free will, and she's staying of her own free will. You need to leave. Now." "That girl belongs to me," Marcus snarled. "Her mother left her in my care, and I'll do with her as I see fit. You got no right to keep her from me." "She's a grown woman, not a child, and she has every right to choose where she lives," Ethan countered. "And looking at what you've done to her, I'd say she's made the smart choice. This is your only warning. Get off this property and don't come back. If I see you near her again, if I hear you've even spoken her name in town, I'll make sure the sheriff knows exactly what kind of man you are." Marcus lunged forward, but he was too drunk and too slow. Ethan sidestepped easily, and two of the ranch hands moved in to grab Marcus's arms, firmly but not roughly. They escorted him back to his horse and made sure he mounted, and then they watched as he rode away, his threats and curses fading into the distance. Kendra sagged against the window frame, relief and residual fear making her weak. It was over. At least for now, it was over. She was still watching the empty road when she heard a soft knock on her door. "Kendra, can I come in?" It was Ethan's voice, concerned and gentle. "Yes," she called, and turned as he opened the door, hovering in the doorway as though unsure of his welcome. "I wanted to make sure you were all right," he said. "I know that must have been frightening to hear." "Thank you," Kendra said, and the words felt inadequate for what he had done, for the way he had stood up for her against Marcus. "Thank you for defending me. Thank you for letting me stay. Thank you for everything." Ethan shook his head. You don't need to thank me for doing what's right. No one should live the way you've been living. No one deserves to be treated like that." He paused, then added quietly, "You can look at anyone however you want. You know that, right? What he told you, what he made you believe, that's not normal. That's not how people should treat each other." Kendra felt tears threatening again. "I know. I think I knew, but it's hard to remember what's normal when you're living in something so wrong." "You're going to remember," Ethan said with quiet confidence. "You're going to heal, and you're going to remember who you are without all his poison. I promise you that." Over the following weeks, Kendra began to believe him. Life at the Diamond L Ranch fell into a comfortable rhythm that felt almost surreal after the chaos and fear of living with Marcus. She earned her keep by helping Rosa with cooking and household tasks, and though she insisted she did not expect charity, everyone on the ranch treated her with a kindness that brought tears to her eyes more than once. But it was Ethan's attention that affected her most deeply. He sought her out every day, always respectful, always careful not to crowd her or make her uncomfortable, but present in a way that made Kendra feel seen and valued. He brought her flowers he found growing wild near the creek. He saved her the best pieces of fruit from town. He asked her opinion on things, actually listening to her answers as though they mattered. And true to his word, he encouraged her to look at him, to meet his eyes, to practice holding his gaze until it stopped feeling dangerous. "Look at me," he would say softly when they talked in the evenings after work was done, when they sat together on the porch watching the sun set over the desert. "You're allowed to look. You're allowed to be seen." Kendra would lift her eyes to his, her heart racing not with fear now but with something else entirely, something warm and fluttering that she was almost afraid to name. Ethan had the most expressive eyes she had ever seen, brown and deep and full of emotions he did not try to hide. When he looked at her, she felt beautiful despite her fading bruises, felt strong despite everything that had happened, felt like maybe she could be someone worth knowing. "What do you see when you look at me?" she asked him one evening, the question slipping out before she could think better of it. Ethan considered her for a long moment, his gaze traveling over her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I see someone brave," he said finally. "I see someone who survived something terrible and came out the other side still capable of trust, still capable of hope. I see someone beautiful inside and out. I see someone I want to know better if you'll let me." Kendra's heart felt too big for her chest. "I want that too," she whispered. "I want to know you better. I want." She trailed off, not sure how to put into words everything she was feeling, everything she was starting to want. "We have time," Ethan said gently. "We have all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere and neither are you unless you choose to. There's no rush, Kendra. We can take this as slow as you want." But despite his words, despite the patience he showed, Kendra could feel something building between them, an attraction that grew stronger with each passing day. She found herself watching him when he worked with the horses, admiring the way he moved, the gentleness he showed even to the most skittish animals. She found herself listening for his voice, her mood lifting whenever she heard him nearby. She found herself thinking about what it would be like to touch him, to be held by him, to kiss him. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. After Marcus, after everything she had endured, she had not been sure she would ever want a man's attention again. But what she felt for Ethan was nothing like the fear and disgust Marcus had inspired. This was different, new, something that felt like coming alive after a long sleep. It was Ethan who finally acknowledged the shift between them, about 2 months after Kendra had arrived at the ranch. They had been working together to repair a fence, and Kendra had been holding a post steady while Ethan nailed it in place. When he finished, he did not immediately move away. Instead, he stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could smell the clean scent of soap and leather that always clung to him. "Kendra," he said quietly, and she looked up at him, holding his gaze the way he had taught her. "I need you to know something. I need you to know that I have feelings for you, real feelings that go beyond just wanting to help you or protect you. But I also need you to know that there's no pressure, no expectations. If you don't feel the same way, or if you're not ready for something like this, that's all right. Nothing changes. You still have a place here and I'll still be your friend. I needed to be honest with you." Kendra's hands were shaking, but not from fear this time. "I feel the same way," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been feeling the same way for weeks now. I was just scared to say anything, scared that maybe I was confused or moving too fast or—" She did not get to finish the sentence because Ethan closed the small distance between them and cupped her face in his hands, his touch achingly gentle. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and even in her inexperience, Kendra understood what a gift that question was, how much it meant that he was giving her the choice. "Yes," she breathed, and then his lips were on hers, soft and sweet and perfect. The kiss was nothing like what Kendra had imagined a kiss would be. It was tender and careful, Ethan clearly holding himself back, letting her set the pace. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathing a little harder, Kendra felt tears on her cheeks and realized she was crying. "Did I hurt you?" Ethan asked immediately, alarm crossing his face. "Kendra, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "No," she said quickly, laughing a little through her tears. "No, you didn't hurt me, I'm happy. I didn't know I could feel like this. I didn't know it could be like this." Understanding softened Ethan's expression, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her close while she cried against his chest. "It should always be like this," he murmured into her hair. "Gentle and good and right. I'm going to spend every day showing you that if you'll let me." Their courtship unfolded slowly over the remaining months of 1882 and into 1883. Ethan was patient and attentive, always careful to respect Kendra's boundaries, always making sure she felt safe and valued. He taught her to ride horses, laughing with her when she was clumsy at first, but praising her progress as she grew more confident. He took her into town, standing proudly at her side even when people whispered and stared, making it clear that Kendra Lancaster was under his protection, and anyone who had a problem with that could take it up with him. Marcus tried to cause trouble a few more times, spreading rumors in town about Kendra, claiming she was a runaway and a thief. But Ethan made sure everyone knew the truth, made sure people understood what kind of man Marcus really was. Eventually, Marcus gave up and left Mineral Park entirely, drifting away to parts unknown, and Kendra felt like she could finally breathe freely. As winter turned to spring in 1883, Ethan began talking about the future, about his plans to eventually own his own ranch rather than working for Morrison. He talked about it carefully, always making it clear that these were just dreams, just possibilities, but Kendra heard the underlying question in his words. He was asking if she could see a future with him, if she wanted the same things he wanted. "I want to build something," Ethan told her one evening as they walked along the creek that ran through the ranch property. "I want land of my own, a house I built with my own hands, a family." He paused, then added quietly, "I want all of that with you, Kendra, if you'll have me." Kendra stopped walking, turning to face him fully. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, and in that golden light, Ethan looked almost otherworldly, too good to be real. But he was real, and his feelings for her were real, and the future he was offering was real. "Are you asking me to marry you?" she asked, her heart pounding. "I'm asking if you want to marry me," Ethan clarified. I'm asking if you can see yourself building a life with me, being my wife, being my partner in everything, but only if that's what you want, only if you're ready." Kendra thought about the girl she had been just a year ago, beaten down and terrified, unable to even look people in the eye. That girl would never have believed she could be standing here, whole and happy, being proposed to by a good man who loved her. But she was not that girl anymore. She was someone stronger now, someone who had survived and healed and learned to trust again. "Yes," she said, and the word came out strong and clear, full of certainty. "Yes, I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want everything with you." Ethan's face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen, and he swept her up into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed with pure joy. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, and Kendra kissed him back with all the love and hope and happiness that filled her heart to bursting. They were married in May of 1883, in a simple ceremony at the ranch with Morrison and Rosa, and all the ranch hands as witnesses. Kendra wore a dress Rosa had helped her make, pale blue cotton with lace at the collar, and Ethan wore his best suit, looking handsome and proud as he said his vows. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, when Ethan kissed her in front of everyone, Kendra felt like the luckiest woman in the Arizona territory. Morrison gave them a corner of his land as a wedding present, 5 acres where they could build their own home. Ethan threw himself into the construction, working every spare moment to create something beautiful for his bride. Kendra helped however she could, and together they built a small but sturdy house with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a parlor. It was not fancy, but it was theirs, and Kendra loved every inch of it. Their first night in their own home, Ethan carried Kendra over the threshold, both of them laughing like children. He set her down gently in the middle of their bedroom, and suddenly the laughter faded, replaced by a different kind of intensity. "Are you nervous?" Ethan asked softly, reading the expression on her face. "A little," Kendra admitted. "Not because I don't want this, but because I don't really know what to expect. My mother never, and Marcus never. I don't know anything about this part of being married." Ethan took her hands in his, bringing them to his lips. "Then we'll learn together. We'll take our time and we'll only do what feels right to you. And Kendra," he waited until she met his eyes, "you can look at me. Through all of this, you can look at me as much as you want. I want to see you and I want you to see me. This is about being close to each other, being connected. There's nothing shameful or wrong about it." His words eased her nervousness, and when he kissed her, Kendra let herself sink into the sensation, trusting him completely. Ethan was patient and gentle, just as he had been with everything else, making sure she felt safe and cherished. And when they finally came together as husband and wife, Kendra kept her eyes open, holding Ethan's gaze, feeling more seen and loved than she ever had in her life. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm after that. Ethan continued working at the Diamond L, saving money and learning everything he could about running a ranch. Kendra kept helping Rosa, but she also started a small garden at their new home, growing vegetables and herbs that she sold in town. The money was not much, but it was hers, earned through her own work, and that felt important somehow. She was not just surviving anymore. She was building something. In the fall of 1883, Kendra discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complicated mix of emotions. Joy at the thought of a child with Ethan, but also fear. Memories of her own difficult childhood making her worry about what kind of mother she would be. When she told Ethan, he pulled her close and held her while she cried, understanding without her having to explain all the complicated feelings tangled up inside her. "You're going to be an amazing mother," he told her firmly. "You know what it's like to be hurt, which means you'll never let our children feel that kind of pain. You know what it's like to be scared, which means you'll make sure they always feel safe. Everything you went through, as terrible as it was, taught you things. It made you strong and compassionate and brave. Our children are lucky to have you." His words helped, and as the months passed and her belly grew, Kendra found herself getting excited about the baby. She and Rosa sewed tiny clothes together, and Ethan built a cradle out of smooth pine, sanding it for hours to make sure there were no rough edges. Morrison and the other ranch hands treated Kendra like precious cargo, insisting she rest and not overwork herself, and their care touched her deeply. The baby came in June of 1884, after a long and difficult labor that left Kendra exhausted but euphoric. When the midwife placed the squalling infant in her arms, Kendra looked down at her son with overwhelming love. He had Ethan's dark hair and her light eyes, a perfect combination of both of them. "He's beautiful," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion as he sat beside Kendra on the bed, staring at their son with wonder. "You're beautiful. You're both so beautiful." They named him James after Ethan's father, who had passed years before. Little James was a healthy baby with strong lungs and an appetite to match, and Kendra took to motherhood with a fierce protectiveness that sometimes surprised her. She had worried she would not know how to love a child properly, but it turned out to be the easiest thing in the world. Every time she looked at James, every time she held him or nursed him or soothed his cries, she felt her heart expand with more love than she thought possible. Ethan was a devoted father, helping with James whenever he could, singing to him in a surprisingly good voice, making silly faces that had the baby gurgling with delight. Watching them together, Kendra sometimes felt so happy it scared her, as though this much joy could not possibly last. But it did last. The years rolled on, bringing challenges certainly, but nothing that broke them. In 1886, Ethan finally had saved enough money to buy his own land, a beautiful stretch of property with good water and grazing. He named it the Lancaster Ranch, and he and Kendra threw themselves into making it successful. It was hard work, harder than anything either of them had done before, but they did it together, partners in every sense of the word. Their family grew too. In 1887, Kendra gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine, a sweet-tempered baby who looked exactly like Kendra had as an infant, according to the one faded photograph Kendra had of her mother. 2 years later, another son arrived, louder and more demanding than his siblings, whom they named William. The house was full of noise and chaos and love, and Kendra could hardly remember the scared, beaten-down girl she had once been. But she never forgot entirely. Sometimes, when the children were particularly rambunctious, testing boundaries the way children do, Kendra would feel a flash of anxiety, an old fear that she would lose her temper the way Marcus had. In those moments, she would step outside, taking deep breaths until the feeling passed. And Ethan always seemed to know, always appeared at her side to take over, to give her space to collect herself. "You're nothing like him," Ethan would remind her gently. "You know that, right? Getting frustrated with your children is normal. Every parent feels that way sometimes. But you would never hurt them. You're not him, Kendra. You'll never be him." One evening in 1891, when James was 7 and helping his father with chores, the boy did something careless that spooked one of the horses. Ethan raised his voice, sharper than usual, and James immediately dropped his eyes to the ground, his whole body going tense and small in a way that made Kendra's heart stop. She watched as Ethan froze, clearly realizing what had happened, what his tone had triggered in his son. He crouched down to James's level, his voice gentling immediately. "James, look at me please," Ethan said. "Son, look at your pa." James slowly raised his eyes, fear still evident on his young face, but Ethan smiled at him, warm and reassuring. "I'm not angry at you," Ethan said clearly. "I was worried because you could have been hurt and that scared me, so I raised my voice. But I'm not mad and you're not in trouble. And James, you never have to look away from me or your mother. You understand? We want to see your eyes. We want to know what you're thinking and feeling. You don't ever have to hide from us." Understanding dawned on James's face, the tension draining from his small body. "Yes, Pa," he said, and then impulsively threw his arms around Ethan's neck. Watching them, Kendra felt tears streaming down her face. This was what she had never had, what she had dreamed of as a child. Safety, love, parents who did not demand fear but offered understanding. They were breaking the cycle, she and Ethan. They were giving their children something better. That night, after the children were asleep, Kendra and Ethan sat together on the porch of their home, looking out over the land they had built together. The stars were brilliant overhead, the desert air finally cooling after the heat of the day. "Do you ever think about that day you came to the ranch?" Ethan asked, taking her hand in his. "Covered in blood and scared out of your mind, sometimes," Kendra admitted. "It feels like another lifetime, like that happened to someone else." "You were so brave," Ethan said. "Even though you were terrified, you still ran. You still saved yourself. I just helped a little." Kendra shook her head. "You did more than help a little. You gave me back my life. You taught me I was worth something, that I deserved to be treated with kindness and respect. You loved me when I did not even know how to love myself." "We saved each other," Ethan countered. "Before you, I was just going through the motions, working and saving money but not really living. You gave me purpose, gave me a reason to build something beautiful. You gave me a family and a home and more happiness than I ever dreamed possible." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands linked, watching the stars. Kendra thought about everything that had brought her to this moment, all the pain and fear and struggle. It had been worth it, she realized. Every terrible thing she had endured had led her here, to this man, to this life, to this joy. "Look at me," Ethan said softly, and Kendra turned to meet his eyes. The same words he had said to her so many years ago in the general store, in the ranch yard when she had arrived bloody and desperate, on their wedding night, when each of their children was born, in 1,000 quiet moments in between. "I love you," he said, and his eyes held everything he felt, all the devotion and passion and tenderness that had defined their life together. "I love you too," Kendra replied, holding his gaze, never looking away. "I'll always love you." And under the vast Arizona sky, surrounded by the evidence of everything they had built and survived and created together, they kissed, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love over fear, who had proven that broken things could be mended and painful pasts could give way to beautiful futures. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the milestones of their growing children. James grew into a thoughtful young man with his father's steady nature and his mother's compassionate heart. Catherine was bright and fearless, equally comfortable riding horses or helping her mother in the kitchen. William was the mischievous one, always getting into scrapes, but so charming that no one could stay mad at him for long. In 1895, when James turned 11, he came to his parents with questions about Kendra's past, about why she had never talked about her family before his father. She and Ethan exchanged glances, a whole conversation happening in that single look, and then Kendra sat down with her son and told him the truth. She did not share all the details, did not want to burden him with the worst of it, but she explained that she had grown up with someone who had hurt her, and that his father had helped her escape and heal. "Is that why you and Pa are always so careful with us?" James asked, his young face serious. "Why you always tell us we can talk to you about anything? Why you never make us feel scared?" "Yes," Kendra said simply. "Because I know what it's like to be afraid of the people who are supposed to protect you, and I never want you or your siblings to feel that way. You should feel safe in your home with your family, always." James hugged her tightly. "I do feel safe, Mama, we all do. You and Pa are the best parents anyone could ask for." The words settled something in Kendra, eased a worry she had carried for years. Her children felt safe. They felt loved. She and Ethan had succeeded in creating the kind of home she had always dreamed of. As the century drew to a close, the Lancaster ranch thrived. Ethan had a reputation as an honest dealer and skilled horseman, and their livestock was sought after throughout the territory. Kendra's garden had expanded into a small but profitable business, and she had even started teaching other women in the area about sustainable growing practices in the harsh desert climate. Together, they had built something that mattered, something that would last. In 1899, when Arizona was still years away from statehood but growing and changing rapidly, Kendra and Ethan celebrated their 16th wedding anniversary. The children had planned a surprise party, decorating the house with wildflowers and baking a lopsided but heartfelt cake. Morrison and Rosa came, along with many of the families they had befriended over the years. It was a joyful evening full of laughter and music, and the warmth of community. Later, when the guests had gone and the children were asleep, Kendra and Ethan found themselves back on their porch, their favorite spot, looking out over the land that represented everything they had accomplished. 16 years, Kendra mused. Sometimes it feels like we just met, and sometimes it feels like I've known you my whole life. Both can be true, Ethan said, pulling her close. Every day with you feels new, but I also can't remember what my life was like before you were in it. Do you remember what you said to me that first day at the ranch? Kendra asked. When I showed up covered in blood and terrified. I told you that you could look at me whenever you wanted, Ethan said. That you were safe. You changed my entire life with those words, Kendra said, her voice thick with emotion. You gave me back something I did not even know I had lost. The right to exist without fear, to meet someone's eyes without expecting violence, to be seen as a person instead of something to control. You already had all of that inside you, Ethan argued gently. You just needed someone to remind you. You saved yourself, Kendra. You were the one who ran, who made the choice to escape, who had the courage to trust again. I just provided a safe place for you to remember who you really were. We both played our parts, Kendra said. We both chose each other, chose this life, chose to build something good out of something painful. They stood there together in the quiet desert night. Two people who had found each other across pain and fear and violence, who had chosen love and built a life that reflected that choice. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise, and they faced it the same way they had faced everything else over the past 17 years since that day in the general store. Together, hand in hand, eyes open, never looking away from each other or from the beautiful, challenging, wonderful life they were creating. As they finally went inside, Ethan paused at the door, turning back to look at Kendra in the moonlight. Look at me, he said, the words that had become their private language, their way of saying I love you, I see you, you matter. Kendra met his gaze without hesitation, without fear, with nothing but love and trust shining in her eyes. Always, she promised. I'll always look at you. And in that moment, in that promise, was everything they had overcome and everything they had become. Two souls who had found each other in the harsh beauty of the Arizona desert, who had turned pain into healing, fear into trust, and loneliness into love. Their story was not about the violence that had marked Kendra's early life, but about the choice to walk away from it, to find something better, to create a future defined not by what had been done to her, but by what she chose to do with her freedom. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most respected operations in the region. James eventually took over most of the day-to-day running of the place, his steady competence making Ethan proud. Catherine married a kind young man from a neighboring ranch, and William, true to his adventurous nature, became a horse trader who traveled throughout the Southwest, but always returned home to the family that anchored him. Kendra and Ethan aged together gracefully, their love deepening with each passing year. They became grandparents, delighting in a new generation of children who would never know fear in their own homes, who would grow up with the legacy of love and safety their grandparents had fought so hard to create. On a spring evening in 1912, when Arizona had finally achieved statehood and Kendra and Ethan were approaching 30 years of marriage, they sat once again on their porch. They were older now, their hair gray, their bodies bearing the marks of decades of hard work, but their love was as strong as it had ever been. "Do you have any regrets?" Kendra asked, a question she had never dared ask before. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I regret that you had to suffer before we found each other," he said finally. "I regret that I could not protect you from that pain, but I don't regret a single moment of our life together. Every joy, every challenge, every ordinary day, I treasure all of it." "Me too," Kendra said softly. "If I could go back and change things, erase what Marcus did to me, I would. But I would not want to change what came after. I would not want to change us." "You never have to change us," Ethan promised. "We're forever, you and me, in this life and whatever comes after." They sat together as the sun set over the desert they had come to love, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. Around them was the evidence of a life well lived, a ranch that would continue for generations, children and grandchildren who carried their values and their love forward into the future. But more than any of that, they had each other, and they had proven that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that kindness could overcome cruelty, that two broken people could come together and create something whole and beautiful. "Look at me," Ethan said one last time, and Kendra turned to meet his eyes, seeing in them everything she had ever needed. Love, respect, partnership, devotion. A promise kept over decades, a vow renewed with every glance. "Always," she whispered, and kissed him as the stars began to appear overhead. Two souls forever entwined, forever choosing each other, forever building a life defined not by the worst that had happened, but by the best they had created together. The story of Kendra and Ethan Lancaster became part of local legend in Mineral Park, a tale told to give hope to those who suffered, to remind people that escape was possible, that healing was real, that love could triumph over fear. Long after they had passed, their descendants would tell the story of how they met, how Ethan had offered Kendra the simple but profound gift of being allowed to look at him, how that single act of kindness had blossomed into a love that spanned decades and created a legacy that would endure for generations. And in the telling and retelling of their story, the message remained the same, that every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, that no one should live in fear, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is look someone in the eye and let yourself be truly seen. Kendra and Ethan had lived that truth, had built their entire life around it, and in doing so had created something that mattered, something that lasted, something beautiful and true and real. Their love story was not just about romance, though it certainly was romantic. It was about survival and healing, about choosing hope over despair, about the transformative power of kindness and the strength it takes to trust again after trust has been shattered. It was about two people who had every reason to be broken but who instead chose to be whole, who found in each other not just a partner but a home, a safe harbor, a place to finally rest and be at peace. And as the years turned to decades and eventually to over a century, the little house Ethan had built with his own hands still stood on Lancaster ranch land, preserved by generations of family who understood its significance. Inside, on the mantel, stood a photograph from their 25th wedding anniversary, Kendra and Ethan looking at each other with undimmed love, their eyes locked in the same intimate gaze that had defined their relationship from the very beginning. To everyone who saw that photograph, to everyone who heard their story, the message was clear and beautiful and true. That love, real love, was not about possession or control or power. It was about freedom and choice and mutual respect. It was about looking at someone and truly seeing them, about being looked at and truly being seen. It was about saying, with words and actions every single day, "You are safe with me. You are valued. You are loved." That was the legacy Kendra and Ethan left behind, and it was worth more than all the land and livestock and material success they had accumulated. They had proven that one act of kindness could change a life, that one person standing up and saying, "This is not right," could make all the difference, that love could heal wounds that seemed unhealable. Their story ended not with drama or tragedy, but with the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their values forward, with a community made better by their presence in it, with two souls who had found exactly what they needed in each other and never let it go. And whenever anyone asked what the secret was to their long and happy marriage, the answer was always the same, simple but profound. They had learned to truly see each other, to value each other, to face every challenge side by side without fear or shame or hiding. They had learned that being allowed to look at someone you love, and having them look back with equal openness and trust, was one of the greatest gifts two people could give each other. Kendra and Ethan Lancaster had taken that gift and built a lifetime around it. And in the building, they had created something that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the power of love to overcome even the darkest circumstances and create light where there had been only shadow. Their story was proof that happily ever after was not just a fairy tale but a choice, made every day to choose each other, choose kindness, choose love. And they had made that choice, faithfully and joyfully, until their very last days, leaving behind a legacy that would inspire and comfort for generations to come.